If you're like I am and so many, post-transplant, you're eventually going to be faced with a decision on whether or not you might return to work, back to your career, back to your job, or not after transplant. And making that decision can oftentimes come with an awful lot of stress, where you're able to do it to go back into the workforce, or whether you're not able to do it and you just simply have to stay at home, maybe draw disability. There's a lot of stress that can go along with the occupational side of transplant. So today on the Transplant Helper, we're going to be discussing that. And I hope this balance of things that I discuss with you today will help you out an awful lot. So go ahead and stay tuned. Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper today. My name is Jim Merle, and today we're going to be continuing our series considering the stress of transplant. Now, if you've not already watched the preceding video about the financial stress of transplant, I would encourage you toward the end of this video to go ahead and hit one of these buttons up in the corners that you'll see or down below in the description and go back and watch that video. I think it'll help you out an awful lot when it comes to those bills that are eventually going to start coming into your house, maybe even piling up on you after transplant. But today's discussion is a little bit related to that, and that is because today we're talking about the occupational stress that can go along with transplant. Because certainly when you think about our occupations, our jobs, our careers, whatever you want to call them, there are times in our transplant lives, pre or post, when we have to pause and give a lot of consideration as to what we're going to do about our jobs and careers in the future. And that's really what we're talking about today. Now, I've already done a program back, I guess, months and months ago now. I'll link to up here in the corners as well as in the description below also, that has to do with making the decision to return to work. Should I go back to work? And in that, I put about 10 or so tips there that I think will really help you to weigh out and make your choice on whether or not you should even attempt to go into the workforce after transplant. And if you do, some things you need to watch out for. So I hope you'll watch that again. I hope you'll watch it at the end of this video, but nonetheless, stick around today as we're talking about the topic, the occupational stress of transplant. Now, let me say in the beginning of this, I absolutely know that we're all together different. Each and every one of us are different. Our situations pre-transplant were different, so obviously our situations post-transplant are going to be different likewise. On the same standard, we're going to have differing and varying opinions on whether or not an individual, meaning you yourself, should return to work or not after transplants. But keeping in mind that there will be, on either side of that, whether you go back into the workforce or not, there's still going to be a lot of stress that comes along with that. So let's start out with a side, just making the supposition or supposing that you're able to return to the workforce. Will there be stress there? Well, more than likely, yes. And it could be because when you go back into the workforce, you get there and you find out things are not exactly the way you remember them. I know that once you're out of the workforce for a little bit of time, or for any length of time for that matter, once you get out and you kind of get away from it and you kind of forget about it, it's easy to look back, especially if your old job, if you go back into the same exact job, it's easy to look back on it and think, boy, that was the most wonderful job I've ever had. I love the people. I love the what I did. I love the situation. And then to go back into that same situation, and maybe some of the people have changed. Maybe the job itself has changed or evolved a little bit, and get back in it because I've been there and done that, and look around and say, wow, this is not what I wanted. This is not exactly what I was expecting. And I know those changes can occur. So just be aware, and you know this already, but be aware that it might not be what you remembered. It might be that there were actually some greener grasses on the other side of that fence that were actually more gray grass than green. I don't know. But keep that in mind. Also, when you return to the workforce, keep in mind and always remember, because it's so important, that you are very different. You're now living a different life. You got to take care of yourself in a different way. Maybe it's because you now have a diet program and an exercise program. Could have been something you were never involved in before. It's certainly going to be because you've now got a different regimen or schedule as far as doctor's appointments, clinic visits, testing that goes on several different times a year, if not multiple times in a month in the beginning. It's certainly going to be because of your medication changes. Now, all of a sudden, even though you may have been on quite a bit of medication pre-transplant, because most of us were getting sicker as we go, now you're on a whole different set of meds that are so important to be taken on time, every time, the right time, that sort of thing that I harp on. And that's now going to be a part of your job, your career. When you're in the workforce, you have to have the flexibility to take care of yourself. And if you can't do that, maybe returning to the workforce is not the best thing for you. But when you get there, again, there can be a lot of stress that goes along with that. I've got a good friend. I won't call her by name, but she'll know who she is if she watches the video. Basically speaking, her transplant occurred just a little bit, maybe at this point, over a year ago. She did pretty well post-transplant, and so because of that, her transplant coordinator suggested that she go ahead and get back to her job, which she happened to be a school teacher, I think an elementary school teacher even. So she goes back into the job when the school year started back. She's less than a year outside of transplant then, and I think in her mind, it was something that she dreaded. As a matter of fact, I know that she did. She was worried about it, but she thought, you know what, I can do this. She got back on the job, and in a matter of weeks or months, she immediately began to discover, you know what, I'm not quite ready for this. Now, whether or not she'll ever be ready, I don't know. She doesn't know at this point. But she began to discover that she's simply not ready to be in the workforce again. The potential out there for catching infections, for maybe even getting into some form of rejection, all those fears that some of us have, which we can't panic over, but we need to know that they're there. She's experiencing, having the days that she didn't expect, that she would just get up out of bed in the mornings, just be wiped out already and weak and not able to deal with everything that's there, particularly the stress that goes along with being in the workforce. That was very hard. And I know some of you out there that are watching this right now, you're in a similar boat. You jump back into the workforce. Good for you. I'm giving you a thumbs up for that. I know your family, you're proud of yourself, but you get back in and then you make the discovery, hey, things are not what I remembered. And as a matter of fact, things are so different now. Things are much harder, and that can be very, very stressful to be in that position. And as far as I go, I've been back in the workforce very, very briefly on 2 different occasions post-transplant, just for a matter of weeks almost. And I'll tell you, both times I went in gung-ho, I've got this, I can do this, got in and discovered very quickly, you know what, I'm not quite ready. I didn't have the stamina that I thought I had. I didn't have the patience, for one thing, that I thought I had. And there's just a lot of issues that go on in my life, perhaps do not in yours, that made it more difficult for me to return to work. But on the other side of that, and this is really more what I want to talk about today, and that is more to the group of us who understand or know, or maybe we've been told by our physicians, you know what, you're more than likely going to have to stay out of the workforce after transplant. Like I've been in my case, I've been on Social Security and Disability now since roughly 2009 or 10-ish. So going on 10 years, something like that, whatever that would be. I've been on Social Security and Disability about that long. And I'll tell you, it's not something that I ever wanted to do. And honestly, if I had my choices, I would much rather be in the workforce right now than on Social Security Disability. Although there are benefits to being on Social Security Disability. The flexibility obviously is there. It's not the life that I choose to live. Now, I've done several videos about the subject, about how to get your Social Security Disability, how to build your case, and even about avoiding the shame of disability. I'll link all of those videos here up in the corners as well as in the description below. I hope you'll watch that. But I'll tell you the truth about my life. I don't want to be disabled. It's just kind of the lot that I've been given. And I'll admit to you, on a daily basis, although you may think differently about me, many of you watch these videos as I put them out a couple of times a week, you probably look at me and you say, well, Jim, you've got a job. I mean, you're the transplant helper. So isn't that your career? Well, number one, I make zero money off of this. So let that be clear. Number two, the only reason I'm able to do this personally is because I can sit down in front of this camera anytime, night or day, when I feel like it, and I can certainly not sit down in the front of the camera when I don't. As far as my inpatient visits that I do, they only occur once a week or so at best, and again, they're scheduled around the way I feel, the way I'm able to pull things off. So it's not that easy. Now, again, your situation is different. I understand that, but let's get down to this. I personally am not able to go back to work, at least at this point. Will that ever change? I don't know. But the doctors don't recommend it. I know better than kind of in this situation. How does that make me feel? I'll be completely honest with you. I was raised up, and many of you were likewise. I was reared up in a generation where it was told to me over and over again, if at least not maybe verbalized, but at least shown to me over and over again, that the man of the house, the father, the daddy, the husband, that he is supposed to be the breadwinner. He is supposed to be the one that goes out and brings home the bacon and the family enjoys it. And that's really the way I always wanted to live my life. I can remember back before my wife and I even got married, basically getting into an argument with her, maybe her and her parents, about whether or not she was going to go to college or whether or not she was going to get a job. Because in my mind, it was my job. Jim, you have to work hard. You've got to study. You've got to go out and get a job, and you've got to make the money for your family. And that's the way I thought. And in the back of my mind now, that's still in general the way that I think. Now, who is my wife? My wife is a lady, a wonderful lady I've been married to 20 plus years now, and she has 4 degrees, headed for her second master's degree. You know, she has had careers, can have careers. She's got everything going for her. She could make 2 or 3 times the money I'm ever able to make anyway. But at the same time, in my mind, the way I was reared and programmed to think, the man is supposed to do that. So what I'm getting at is it makes me feel terrible. I feel terrible that post-transplant, I'm not able to jump back into the workforce 100% and confidently and comfortably make a living for my family. Maybe some of you out there in the same boat. Maybe some of you out there, I know some are because I talk to you. You're in the same boat. You really, really want to make a contribution to your family. You want to be there for them. You want to be the breadwinner. You want to be all these things, but you're not able to do that, and that causes a lot of stress. You know, when things get difficult, maybe when the bank account gets a little low, or maybe when things just don't look like they're going to work out, and those bills that I talked about in the last program, the financial burdens start piling up, and the stress from that begins to rear its head. That's at the point where a normal person, and I say normal, I should say average person, might say, oh, well, I'll go down to the workplace and go down to the job, ask for some overtime, we'll get this taken care of. I can't do that. Many of you can't do that. And that brings on a tremendous amount of stress and worry. Now, my general answer to stress and worry is don't worry about it. You know, put it aside. Don't let it bother you. Just try to forget about it. Yeah, that works for like 2 seconds, and then it really doesn't work. So today I want to give you a few different tips. I don't know how many there'll be, 3, 4, whatever, that I think can really help you when it comes to dealing with the occupational stress that can come with going to work and, or in my case, not being able to go back in the workforce. Here's what you can do. Number 1, you can find ways, more than likely, under your situation, everyone will be different. There may be ways that you can find to basically supplement some income even though you're not able to go back into the full-time workforce. Again, I'm on full-time, full 100% Social Security disability, and I know state per state it may be a little bit different, but most states allow you a little bit of money or income you can make each month and maintain that 100% or full Social Security disability. So check with your local Social Security office and see if there are any limits as far as the number of hours you can work, as far as the amount of money you can make. I know years ago in the state of Alabama, you can make up to $1,000, going back in the workforce. And although that's not much to some people in our neck of the woods, that'll make a house payment, or that'll make a car payment, or that'll buy the groceries. So that can be something that may be possible. Maybe you're not ready for the 40, 50-hour a week workforce. I used to work 60, 70 hours a week. I'm not ready for that. I'm nowhere near ready for that. But, sometimes and at times I might be able to work 20 hours a week or 15 hours a week. If you feel like you're up to that, check into that. See if it's possible for you to make some supplemental income so that you can feel like, and that's really what this is about, really just feeling like you're making a contribution. If that's not possible in the career you're used to, maybe there's something you can do. There's so many jobs out there today that can be done from the ease and lax, if you want to say that, from our homes. I'm sitting here right now in front of my computer, my second monitor here. Not that I'm into this, but there are things that can be done now via the internet to make some supplemental income. Again, check with what those limits are, but to make a little bit of income and to help your family out. And making that contribution can make a little bit of difference, especially when most of your stress, like mine, is basically coming from the guilt and the pride that I have that I want to be a functioning part of my family. So first of all, check into making some income like that. If possible, I don't know if it's possible. Maybe you're not even into that, but nonetheless, that's a possibility. Number 2, and I think this is a big one, and this is really what I'm trying to do, and that is just make yourself useful. whatever you can do. And you may not be able to go out and mow the grass around your house or wash the dishes or whatever, but make yourself useful around the house. If you're going to be disabled and you're going to be at home, if it's a possibility, again, your health dictates this, not mine, but if it's a possibility, make yourself useful, keep yourself busy. I know that for me is a really a biggie. Am I perfect at it? If my wife sees the video, she'll say no. If she comes home most days, the clothes aren't washed, the beds aren't made, everything's not exactly the way I would want it, or I know that she wants it. But the things that I do, the things that I am able to accomplish, I feel pretty accomplished in that. If I can check off a few boxes of the list for the day, I feel pretty good about that. I know that's simple, but just feeling like you're a part of something, I think that is something that helps fill that void of not being in the workforce, not being the functioning member that you once were. So try that. The third place, and kind of similar to it, and I'm huge into this, is to try to help someone else. One thing you've got going for you as a transplant patient, post-transplant patient, is that whether you've had a heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever it is, you are now becoming an expert in the field of your transplant. Not that you're going to know everything. I've proven now for over 100 episodes that I certainly don't know everything about transplant, even about heart transplant. But what I do know that I gained from my life, I share with other people. And really, when I talk about sometimes about wanting to help the transplant helper community to grow, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not only you watching my videos, which, by the way, thank you for doing that, but I'm talking about you actually participating in these videos, giving me feedback, and then taking the information that we learn together, and that's what this is, that we learn together, and sharing that with other people. When you go down for your clinic visits, which will be quite often, when you sit in the waiting rooms there's somebody in that waiting room that needs to know what you already know by experience. Or there's somebody in that waiting room that's got some experiences you don't have that you would do well to trade. So just try to be a part of something like that. I know that will help. Now, in the fourth place to that, the people that do help you the most, like in my case, my wife, that help us with this, show them your appreciation for that. I know that our patience can run thin. Mine does, because sometimes as I see her go off to work or go off to school, I can't ever communicate it well, but part of what really just messes with my mind is the fact that that's not me doing that. Maybe there's some jealousy or envy there. I don't know. But show our appreciation toward the people who help us most. If there's someone in our household who really helps us meet ends meet, who really keeps us motivated and keeps pushing us and encourages us, try to throw that back at them. That'll be a tremendous, tremendous help. I don't know if anything I've said today has helped you. Maybe your life is so much different, but I would like to hear about it. So on the one hand, if you've gone back into the workforce and you're successful at that, let us hear about it. I'd like to hear about it below this video. On the next hand, if you've gone back into the workforce and, for lack of better terms, you've not quite been able to cut it, let us hear about it. I'd like to know about it. And then on the third hand, like I've discussed here, if you're not able to go back in the workforce and that causes you some kind of anxiety or stress, we would like to hear about it, because sharing in this thing can really help us all. Really just to think these things through and to know what to expect. And again, the transplant helper community is all a part of that. I really appreciate you watching today's program. I hope that it's helped you out in some small way, and that you'll continue to watch the series. I think on the next time we're going to be talking about the stress that goes along with our relationships. So financial stress, occupational stress, and relational stress will be the next episode here in just a day or two or three. And so I hope that you'll be willing to watch it when it comes up. But nonetheless, thank you for joining me today. And until next time, I want to say to each and every one of you, and I'm looking you directly in the eye, stay stronger, friends.